Hi, I'm Lauren Keating with Preferred Professional Network. We're here in the Holocaust Museum of the Jewish Community Center in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Today we'll be talking with Dr. Mary Gallant, author of the book Coming of Age in the Holocaust. Dr. Gallant, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Dr. Gallant is an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Rowan University and has been a teacher for over 30 years. You are also a Holocaust scholar, and you're the author of the book Coming of Age in the Holocaust: The Last Survivors Remember. As a sociologist, you study how social processes and institutions influence human behavior. Why was it important for you to tell the stories of the Holocaust survivors?
I wanted to know how they could get through, how they could survive. There are different theories and about surviving, and some of them portray the survivor not well, I feel, and others open up to a more humanistic approach. And I was interested in documenting what I felt was getting to know how survivors got up in the morning, how they got through the day. And I put that into the descriptions I have of the people I look at. I only looked at 18. And that what I felt it was perfect. And this was the beginning of the research. I didn't intend for it to be the only thing. So the processes then I feel that I'm interested in are the social processes that uplift you and make you whole again, always, no matter what you're discussing. But what we're discussing there is a complete eradication of everything that's civilized. And we, in our normal lives, never or rarely even get a glimpse into this. It's it's cold. It takes away your breath. It destroys your life. You're nothing. Uh, you have no way to imagine it until it's taking you over. And so always my question would be then, something I knew I wanted to know, just tell us your life story and begin with how you came to know the Holocaust.
Early in the book, you write survivors are expected to comply when society lost attention on the Holocaust. Why do you think for so long survivors remained silenced or did not want to tell their story?
From a sociological point of view, looking at um, what we call DPs now, displaced persons, after the Allies saved Germany, let's say, from where they had been for since 1933 at least. Uh, they had people there who, in all of the camps that they freed, who died on them, which scared them out of their minds, the British and the Americans. And so they had no place to go and they were depressed. And they were the ones who were in the German camps in Germany, in the camps in Poland, not the only ones, but they remained there. And others who had come from different backgrounds seemed to get away faster. But especially if you had come there from Germany, like Hamburg, from the north, and you went to places that were more central to and close to Berlin, you 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 were more likely to be Jews who were aware about how bad things were, and it never they were depressed. They couldn't take it in. So silence is something you have after you've had yourself tragically imploded. I'll use that term, it's a mechanistic term, but you can imagine that having been a teenager, growing up in larger school situations where there are all kinds of class levels, and you can understand in a small, tiny way what it means to have yourself destroyed. Just a glimpse at it, it can wear you right out as an adolescent. Adolescents and young adults have great energy, they have great capacity. So the idea that they were silenced, I think they were in shock. It's how I see it, and I've built a bibliography in the book that shows you the particular literature, the particular readings that give you that. It's like you're numb.
Mhm.
And silence isn't hard. If you, for instance, if I had to be silent, it'd be my first place of reserve. Silence. You know, you want to see what's going on before you commit to being a whole person again.
Do you find in after speaking with the survivors that they were ready to talk, especially with you, and to share their stories?
Oh, yes. Because I think if you reverence the other, and they, didn't know me and I didn't know them, but I came with my student, an assistant, I was a graduate student. And so we were just so glad that anybody having suffered that much would be willing to sit, to express themselves to strangers. And we just wanted their life story from beginning to end. I just wanted to hear everything that they felt was important. And I had all the time we needed to listen and to, I mean, keep us on track. But it was their ball game. So that's how I did it, and that's how we got going. Um,
Let's talk a little bit about your process of writing the book then. What was your process like researching, interviewing, and then writing the book?
hmm, I I had written papers for presentation, not on my research, but on other people's research. So an analysis of secondary and primary literature. But I started that then as a graduate student. I was at the University of Minnesota when I started, but I'd go out, I spent some time in other areas, especially when I was beginning the first interviews. And I did those in our northeastern corridor here. And beautiful university campuses have wonderful libraries. And so there's where I started. And uh, and when I say wonderful libraries, I mean not one thing would be missing um, that you wanted. And so that's how I started. But then I got my first position, uh, and I got it at a small graduate school on the West Coast, just up the shore from on the West Coast of Canada. And they had a lovely area. There were lots of Holocaust opportunities to study those who were survivors. Uh, and yet, I was late in getting there. It was in the late 80s, and I uh, didn't know if I'd find anybody, but if I did, it would probably be people there who hadn't been interviewed before and hadn't, exposed themselves. But little chance of that because I was going through, Jewish federations and Jewish congresses, and where you would go to celebrate the Sabbath with your community in prayer. That's where I wanted to find out my first steps because religion was so important. Even if you weren't really much more than an agnostic, all of that would have been important to you in a survival context,
Mhm.
a destruction context. So I started there and Vancouver, and they're a big congregation. And my student knew all the roads in Vancouver and only wanted to know. My theoretical background was in symbolic interaction, and it was about people, for people, it was about interaction. We take in certain methodologies that might leave you doing network analysis, but you basically had to do your first, your starting point with the life story, with getting to know people firsthand. And there wouldn't be much chance much longer for having real survivors. So I thought we had to get right at it, and so did my student, and we were totally committed to this project. And it stayed that way for a while,
How long did you speak to the survivors for?
as long as they wanted. And I never counted the hours, but it had to be their place. It didn't have to be their homes. It didn't have to be their offices. It could be either. It could be in a park, a quiet place. We fell in love with the survivors. We just, in that area, we didn't stay there. Left quickly and went to Florida because I wanted to have my career down here.
You know, the survivor stories were so powerful. I feel like they're so important, these stories, to be told and to be heard. It was the book and their stories is just so interesting, but it's very powerful and it's very touching and at times for me very hard to read.
Really?
Yeah, oh, especially hearing the stories of the children. It's devastating, very traumatic what they went through. I'm
Yes.
curious how this change, hearing their stories changed you as a person and you as a scholar.
Well, I was already sensitized, but it made me aware of how many ways people reached out to try and save children. They grasped eventually. It took a while. People don't want to let in. I mean, we're looking at Palestine now with people out there protesting for Palestine. Jews are protesting for Gaza, and that happens. But what you hear about, if you're looking at, for instance, military and how did the war go forward, war covering or masking genocide, some people say, some of the scholars look at, you're probably not getting that feedback. But so I did that. So that was the lead in. People wanted to save the children. This was in France. Rene from France. He came over here on a Ford scholarship. He loved his nuns who saved him, and they saved him because the French resistance got in touch with them. His father was with the resistance. They had been in Luxembourg, I think it was. His father was Jewish and mother too, and they were tailors. So they wanted him to be adopted, and he wouldn't go. He wouldn't part from them. That was Rene. He had the brightest blue eyes, and I can imagine him as a child. And it would look something like he looks now, but he became a professor, Oriental Studies, and I met him up there in Vancouver. I haven't seen him again because there's an idea that you don't go back. You hold off. I called him Rene. That's not his name. None of them, their names are not there. Uh, I kept my key, but sociologists don't reveal just in case there should be some backlash. And with this kind of thing, you have to be very careful. So I did. I took that precaution, and so the children then. Mariette had a schizophrenic break as a child, and she's been recovering ever since. And people just love her to pieces. She's got her family. She lives in Canada, in Vancouver, and she's a lover. I mean, uh, this saves you. They all say that. You've got to love. I mean, it helps you a lot. It's not, just saying prayers. It's loving. You want to love and you watch for love in others. And so that's how we started. Now, if I veered off course.
And you no, you perfect so far. I'm curious too about how age plays a role and how the survivors would tell the stories. Now, in the book, we'll get into your model later on, but the
Oh,
meat of the book is the stories of the
yeah,
survivors, and you break this up by children, adolescents, and then young women, young men.
yes.
It's interesting to see the difference on how the survivors recall their stories. How did age play a role in how survivors told their stories, as far as recounting specific details
Oh,
or
that, yes.
associating we versus I and the way they told their stories, as we see it a lot?
It varies, the we versus I, it varies by person, but I didn't look for that specifically, though I may have picked up on it in the as you went through it. Uh, but the we, they would have lost their we, as especially the children, if they lost their parents. Now, Marie shows that because they had a big Polish family, but they fled Poland and headed west. And her brothers and sisters became part of the resistance. She became a messenger. You may have seen those things in the movies about children who carried messages for the resistance. And she did, and so she would have witnessed things that there's where you get a break, where you have a shock you can't take in. She's a child when she's doing these runs, but she doesn't talk about that much. There's so she's got two, which is nice when you just have two, I think, and they're both very good people. For Marie and Marianne, I can't, I'm forgetting now which one, but I think Marie is the strong one, and the one she has to hold on to as a messenger, and Marianne, or it could be the other way, but she knows it, and this is what Marie is strong, she'll say, and but she's Marie now. This is what's giving me a moment of doubt. So I'd have to rush back in and see what I wrote. Anyway, the thing is, the children. Then you have to worry about that because, as I take a lot of trouble to show you, they've got to learn a lot about how to embrace a culture that is nurturing. And then if you get involved in this terror scenario, and it's horror and terror together, there's no break in it. It's if you look at the women, they'll tell you they looked for receptivity in others who were in their environment once they got into it with another we. But they had established selves, not the children so much. They depended on their parents. I mean, I right up till my parents died, and even after, because you have to mourn, that joined to parents who have this strong family to give you is something. If it were taken away suddenly, it's going to jolt you. So when I went to university, and it were I for the first time really couldn't go home to them every evening. I just about lost my capacity to breathe. So I understood a little bit about close family ties, and they had them. Most of them, yeah, they were strong in their families, but this gave them strength eventually when they could. Perhaps it's like learning to swim, I suppose. I'm not saying I ever learned well, but I know that I had lots of doubts about going into that water, and I know they had a lot of doubts about getting into where those people they didn't like were putting them. And for the adolescents, of course, they do it differently.
I'm interested about the adolescence because I
Yeah,
feel that period in your life is when you're trying to find your identity in yourself, and the Holocaust stripped them of that. They had no identity. How do you think they coped, or in your model, how would you frame the way that they were able to cope without that loss of identity, or with that loss of identity?
they had it, but I think in Poland, you see, Jews they hadn't made their final plans for the. I'm approaching that right now in my paper, and so I wanted to do it well in Poland before, because right now the Holocaust people are saying that the genocide was committed in the true heartland of Soviet territories, Western Russia, Russian territory, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Romania, Estonia, and then going into Moscow. Um, it's there that you get the bigger numbers of massacres. And in Poland, what I call a big number is 500. They were doing that there. So, I'm looking through the literature and why aren't you calling this a genocide? So, adolescents, the Nazis have an idea about race, that is going to allow them to go in and clean out areas to create Lebensraum, living spaces. For Germans, most of the German people didn't want to go anywhere, but the Nazis were real risers, and all kinds of things happening in a place that's got, what, 220 million people. That's not too small, not too big for a country in Europe. But what they used to be were empires in the First World War, which is only 20 years before. So the people then they're not what we recognize as really anchored in, was it Poland they grew up in, or where it was a Czechoslovakia, because they had so many wars for land grabs. That, I mean, I don't mean to offend them. I'm just saying, if I'm comparing us to them, and people from strong family roots, like with adolescents and so forth, they're really hurting. The children are, the adolescents, even the adults. They're really, really hurting, really. And so they're different from the other survivors that are in those camps. And as it turns out, you see that very clearly with the DPs. They don't come out fast from, oh, come here. I'm here. I'm having a good time. Let's get something going. No, they're very, very, they're healing. And so the adolescents then had access to ghettos, is where I was going with this. And the ghettos were only for Jews. And they had ghettos for about, I mean, the larger numbers, like the Warsaw Ghetto or Krakow Ghetto. The Lodz Ghetto was the last of the ghettos, big ghettos. And but there were a couple of other names as well. Anyway, the the ghettos were awful. You starved, but you were with your own people. Now that doesn't mean a lot when everybody there is from, like 600 miles away, 1,000 miles away, and these things make a difference. And you're coming from the rural areas in Poland, like Skarczysko, where is it Robbie? I think it's Robbie is from, and so there are differences, but what I found, if you look at the people from like Chaim, and also the one survivor I have that is partisan, Russian partisan. He's an adult now. He left his ghetto and went to train with the Russian partisans, and he spent most of his time in the forest, like you read about. I bring all of those literatures in where you can get a feeling for entering their lives as they live through it. And I've got some of those if you're interested, but I'm sure you've read them. Anyway, yes, the ghettos are where you run away from sometimes and come back, and when you do, you better know how to kill the guards. So he had to learn to kill, and that was hard for him. Mm-hmm. Because in Judaism, I get the understanding from what they were saying, killing is not what you do a lot of. Most people don't. I can remember one of them from one of the big ghettos. He went then to Auschwitz. A lot of them went to Auschwitz. It was the biggest place. It was out in the west of Poland, and northwest of Poland, but it used to be Prussia. Before that, Prussia is, wealthy Germany, and the Nazis didn't like it that the Poles got their good materials, and they kept in touch with the ethnic Germans who were there, and they said they were coming in to save the ethnic Germans. These Nazis would say it was the first place they invaded, and it was so first place they invaded, but they had to make up this big story about why they were coming. They're coming in to rescue the ethnic Germans, and so the ethnic Germans could have been Jews, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was very pluralistic. Vienna was very Jewish. I'm not saying the Jews didn't want their segregation, but they had to want it. They had to create it. Nobody necessarily would have, I think, forced them into it at that point. Yes, in the 1200s or before that, and then in the Renaissance. Anyway, things were changing over time. And what we see is that with World War I, what we lost was the Austro Hungarian Empire, in which Jews were a small minority, welcomed, and they brought a lot of civilization to wherever they were. And this is Germany. So when you hear something about people saying, the Germans didn't really care about anti-Semitism too much, there was a basis for that, and it comes from their particular history. A lot of anti-Semitism in Poland, but uh, before the Nazis entered, the Jews were a growing population, growing minority there. And if you look at literature that was done by people who survived in the Warsaw Ghetto, that uh, 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 that literature will show you that uh, there's a very high expectation of moving from the ghetto where you would be killed if they caught you leaving it, but the Warsaw Ghetto, they moved out. There was a way of referring to the place right around them. They knew it very well because they weren't in Warsaw mixed. And America, through its Jewish New York, um, people were trying to get a lot of money, a lot of help into them before they became a ghetto and before the Nazis took hold there. So there's a big story there that it's you have to read a wide literature right now in order to get a sense for it. But we're coming into a place where, through the USHMM in Washington and other uh, museums like that here throughout this area in New Jersey, everybody's with you, everybody's on board, everybody wants to know. And in my classrooms, it was wonderful to teach them about this.
And when we think about now moving from the ghettos and them going into the concentration camps, again, I'm interested in what the age difference when dealing with being in the camps and what do you really explore in the book with that?
We're trying to look at age because a lot of medical science was interested in showing that there was an effect of trauma, perhaps different on children than it would be on people who were um, early adults, people who were a little older. Now, the thing about the concentration camps is they killed most of the people who were over 30 or 40, depending on which group of camps you're talking about, extermination camps or Auschwitz at the beginning before it became much of a camp in the, or even, yeah, not much of a camp, in the earliest days. I think it was 1940, 41, they really had structures there. And it was, I think, 42 before you had Birkenau. I did a lot of exploration of what literature I could get my hands on, but I understood where I'd be pursuing a path in my work once I had a chance to explore it. But I had suspected that they were more interested in building up applications based on what they could learn from people who came home with shell shock in the First World War and in concentration camps. It wasn't just shell shock, it would have been from something else. And not only that, starvation was the basis for concentration camps. You weren't supposed to go there and have a holiday. They were going to work you to death or you die by attrition. This is, and hunger disease is something that uh, you lose your mind, you lose everything. So, of course, that would have been you would see what age would do then, looking from the children. But there's this odd thing you're picking up on about children facing trauma. It might actually have a little pivot point there that would thrust them into something that they'd have to recover from. But now, as we look at PTSD, we're seeing that young men who like go to Vietnam or go to any war zone, they feel a great comfort in their what we learn in the Holocaust. The people who are receptive to them, their people, they learn to trust their own, love their own. And so we're learning back a little from them now about that. But anyway, that's the adults. And so we didn't, there's not the older one, we only learned from the young adults.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I picked up, I think it was Peter, I think you named him in the adolescent. He was all about being very angry and wanting to condemn what was going on and finding that redemption. How do individuals reconcile their feelings of condemnation with broader societal narratives of forgiveness, reconciliation, or justice?
Oh, in the usual ways that we see it portrayed, the, justice. Justice is something that you don't lose fast. If we look at Chaim, one of the men, he was older, very robust man, wanted to be a rabbi, and he became that eventually. I guess he became, I think, yes, Chaim, I saw it was in Vancouver, and so he came from the Middle East. I'm wondering which city. Would it be Jerusalem? But anyway, we didn't talk too much about what he did there. Where we talked, they had a dairy farm. You may have read that. And so if we look at Chaim, he he went to Mauthausen after Auschwitz, and then his legs swelled up, and they put him on a vessel. It was a labor camp there. You were in the salt mines inside where they were building airplanes and other things. And a lot of people were then had gone from Auschwitz because it was a big. This would be in see the survivors. A lot of us are getting will be from 1930, not 1939, but I have, but so from 1944 and 45, and not much in 45. Everything in terms of discovery of the camps comes in 45. We're saving them in 1945.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They've had a lot of chances to get hit hard. And it's amazing that they survived, that there was anyone surviving. And so when the British discovered them, the British, Bergen-Belsen was where I think that it had. No, okay, so some of the Allies discovered them in. There was a camp for Allied soldiers that they closed down. That was part of uh, another story that I put together in this paper that I'm doing now. But so some of the generals may have seen before they did in Bergen-Belsen, but I worked initially with the idea that it was Bergen-Belsen where a tank commando came in, ours, the Allies, and they were introduced by it was in 1944, probably March, real early. If it wasn't exactly the same time, it would have been, like hours in the difference. So this was in Germany that they discovered them, not where we think of the worst camps. I brought up Chaim for that reason, then, because he was the one who, made friends even with his enemies. They respected. He'd be with the jackhammer in the salt mines. He was this chunky guy, but really bright. And less people think about chunky as taking away from your capacities up here. But they liked him, they respected him. The men did on the other side in those workhouses, and they represented the people of Germany to me. There, you didn't. It wasn't all SS, there. The SS and the Einsatzgruppen, or their operational arms, throughout the system. The SS were the heavy hitters when it came to doing bad things. For me, how I say it to myself. And so not to get too involved in either side, but justice was something they understood on the other side, as well as from the camps, even more so. They could feel the difference there. They were closer to uh, the humanity of the other in these camps. Now I'm making a lot of a little thing there because remember they're not supposed to do that, and it could be dangerous to their health if they were found, fraternizing in any way. But some of them, of course, we know from the literature did. Did you think that it helped him? The fighting spirit helped him?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, of course. But see, that plays to the thing of hate. Now, for me, you have to get beyond that. And I think for a lot of people who, even the PTSD, you can't, hate is short term. You can't, that can't bring you very far. It won't bring you very far.
I wonder then, is that why they put their past as their past lives and they move on to the present and they compartmentalize for that reason?
Compartmentalize. I think if you're surviving, compartmentalization is fine. Absolutely, you have to focus on surviving. You want to do it. That's where the challenged identity part comes in. You have to make a decision, having made some interaction, a preliminary interaction, as celebrate your birthday in a car rolling across country, and you're 13 maybe. Your parents are somewhere, but people can't even go to the bathroom with the same sense of privacy because they might have got a bucket to go to the bathroom with as they close the doors on these cattle cars. And I think it was Robbie saying, cattle cars. They didn't come in cattle cars. Cattle cars are refrigerated. And this was summer for a lot of them. Heated in winter. We didn't get that. So I didn't laugh when he was saying it. But I knew I would when I felt so good about that. So they fought. Yes, there was this internal dialogue. This is what we know about in growing up as a child from the interactionists and George Herman. They learn to play. They learn with language. You do the same thing when you're socializing yourself to this new environment. And if you don't, you probably get killed early. Those camps are terrible. Terrible isn't the word for them. We don't have words for them. And, we might have words for war because we send our soldiers to war and they come back. But they'll tell you the hating thing, the fighting and killing, it hurts.
Thank you for tuning in to this Preferred Professionals exclusive interview with Holocaust scholar and author of Coming of Age in the Holocaust, The Last Survivors Remember, Dr. Mary J. Gallant. We would also like to extend our gratitude to the Esther Raab Holocaust Museum and the Goodwin Education Center for allowing us to film our interview at their facility. To learn more about our exclusive interview series and Dr. Gallant, please visit www.preferredprofessionals.org.